You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. This is episode number 337 of the show, and you are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail. I prepared and posted this episode 8 days before you're hearing it, as I'm hopefully in the middle of my TSX challenge in the Sierras. And as it happens, today, the release date of the show, which is the 31st of August, we're scheduled to be summiting Whitney. How exciting, eh? I'm still up against the clock as I prepare this show, and I don't know why I keep doing this. Less than 12 hours before I actually leave for the airport, I'm writing this at 5 p.m. on the Wednesday evening, still to pack for my trip. I've always been this way, so don't shout at me. It'll work out. Today, we've got a kind of different main guest. His name is Ryan Leighton, and when I tell you his trail name is Ken Burns, that should be a bit of a clue. He's got a great story, so I'm not going to preempt him telling it. You'll just have to hang around and hear him. After Ryan, we've got what I'm calling Dom Tammaro's exit interview. Dom is one of our class of 2022, and I'm afraid his hike is done for this year. He graciously agreed to come on and tell us what happened. Still on the trail, and still smiling through, Dan Whitesides, or Trumpet, and his dog Frankie are now heading south. Even the ever-laughing Trumpet has had a setback this week, so he's going to tell you all about that. Then, as promised, the humongous Chapter 6 concludes with George's journey into Damascus. Always a great place to see. So, especially given the time, let's hear now from Ryan. Our guest today isn't a thru-hiker, though he has hiked about 400 miles on the Appalachian Trail. Yet he's still got a trail name. This is Ryan Leighton, or Ken Burns. Hey Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Well, I'm pleased you come on the show. You've had quite a long interest in the AT, haven't you? Tell us how it started.
I have, yes. Well, it helps to have the Appalachian Trail in my state of Maine. And about third grade in primary school, I recall there was a science pamphlet my teacher had dropped off there, and I remember opening it up and seeing this bright yellow sign that said Appalachian Trail with a little hiker symbol, and to me that just set me off on curiosity, and I just the idea alone that someone could walk from Georgia to Maine and do it all with a backpack just was beyond my wildest imagination. So that had always kind of stuck around in the back of my mind. And the hiking bug didn't really actually catch me until later on when I was in college. I did some outbound hikes up Katahdin in the wintertime, and then I had moved to Acadia National Park and did some hiking there. And
yeah, we're actually going to return to your Katahdin craziness in a minute, but
sure,
because there is some crazy stuff there, isn't there? So it was on your it was one of your adventures that you were interested in doing some sort of adventures, and that's really, it got that adventure thing going. And it's probably fair to say that though you've not hiked the AT in its entirety, what you have done has probably influenced more people to think about hiking the Appalachian Trail than the thousands of thru-hikers have done. Tell everybody what you've worked on.
Sure, yeah. In 2015, I set out to follow a father and son from my hometown of Boothbay, Maine, as I had learned that they were going to try to thru-hike the Appalachian Trail northbound. And I didn't have the financial means or the time off to do that. So I said, I'm going to equip them with cameras, let them document everything, and then as my role of a storyteller, stitch that together. And that became ultimately the full-length documentary Walking Home, which is something else, I tell you. And I'll tell people what I think about the film a little bit later on, actually. But it's been watched about 750,000 times, hasn't it?
what do you think has been the reason for its success? Because this, Appalachian Trail hiking is a relatively niche field, isn't it? Yet 750,000 times this has been watched. What is it about the hike? And I'm sure you've got a lot of input into this because you get comments on YouTube, obviously. So what do you think has been the success of it, the reason for its success?
Well, I think where Walking Home is different than a lot of other hiking blogs out there is a lot of the hiking blogs focus on the gear alone and what you need to prepare for the trail, whereas Walking Home was strictly a narrative story, and it really hones on to the human emotion. And there are 4 different voices that are predominant in the story, and I think those different voices, no matter who those characters are, resonate with people. And when I set out to make the film, I said, hey, I'll be glad if 10,000 people watch it. Ultimately, in the back of my mind, I said, if I could make 125,000 people watch it, then I will be over the moon. And 3 or 4 years later, we're almost at 1 million views, and that's
do you
crazy.
Do you find it seasonal, Ryan? And the reason I ask that is I know that mine is definitely seasonal. I get a big bump up in November and December time because people are thinking about their hikes for next year. Do you find your film is seasonal as well?
It is, yes. Right around fall time, right around October, November, people are indoors more, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, and they start watching the YouTube videos and they start getting inspired. And then right around the December, January mark, people will actually reach out to me directly. They'll find me somehow and they'll call me up directly and ask me questions, whether, hey, I'm inspired by your documentary. Every year I'll have a handful of people call me just to kind of pick my brain over it. And then once the actual season starts between March and August, we're still getting views, but at one point, right towards the beginning when I uploaded it to YouTube, we were getting about 1,000 views per day. So
right. It's exciting to have this impact upon such an iconic trail. I mean, your film is, for me, far better than the Walk in the Woods film. That the adaptation of Bryson's book. I love the book, but the film sucked. But you really sort of got into some of the emotions. I'm going to talk about the film itself in a minute. But tell us how you got there in the first place. I know you graduated in journalism, and you were a reporter. So talk to us how you actually got into film.
Yeah, so I went to college at the University of Maine. I had always been into film, but I'd always been too scared to actually learn how to film during my college days, which was one of my biggest disadvantages. And I graduated amongst the recession in 2010, no real good job prospects, and I graduated with a journalism degree. So I went back to my hometown and joined the local newspaper, making a very small amount of money doing so. But this was also at the time when print journalism was decreasing and readership was decreasing.
Didn't you think about that, by the way, when you decided to do a journalism degree? Just as a matter of, it's a straightforward question to ask you.
I did, but I still wanted to get the rudimentary skills under the belt. I wanted to have a byline. I wanted to know the basics of storytelling, and might as well use my degree, right? So,
sure.
So I set out, and this was at a time when small town newspapers were struggling to get online readership, and so we had this website that we had just started, and this is when the medium of video really started to play into our online environment. So that's when, during the winter, I went over to the local access channel, a little local cable station in my hometown, and I said, hey, I'd like to learn how to use video cameras. I'd like to learn how to edit. I'd like to learn the very basics of that. And they showed me. They showed me at this point, the GoPro 2 had just come out. And I said, well, I'm an adventurous guy. I like to go out and do some crazy stuff, and I might as well document that. And that's kind of what led me to do some winter ascents up Katahdin, and survive. and
which in itself is a thing.
Very much so. Yeah.
So you got the GoPro, and the film. So the film was a passion for you to sort of get involved with, and were you just wanting to film, or did you want to edit as well?
I wanted to be able to film and then learn how to tell a compelling story through the visual medium. And for me to do that, I just had to go out and film whatever recreational craziness that I had in the back of my mind. So with Katahdin in my backyard, that's basically how I started things off.
Well, I think it's time to start talking about the recreational craziness, because it really is, isn't it? Talk to us, and it's all about, or a lot of it was about Katahdin. Talk about what you did, because you started with only small hikes, you said, and you didn't do any backpacking at all. But then you went to join an outbound club, I think, at college.
Yeah, in college, my junior year, we went up and we hiked Katahdin in February. And if you've ever been in Baxter State Park in February, it's about 15 degrees most of the time.
Charming.
Around the daytime, the summit winds get up to about 50, 60 miles per hour. And we were going to go backpack up the A-Ball Trail. We'd have to ski in about 11 miles and then backpack up the A-Ball Trail. And it was one of the most arduous things I had ever done in my life. And we made it. It was about 5 or 6 of us. We made a little igloo that night, packed it, and we all got in there and heated up the igloo. And it was marvelous. The stars were out.
Oh, hang on. You got to cut that back. You got to come back now. You got to tell me, how do you make an igloo?
You take a bunch of shovels and you pile up a bunch of snow. This is a rudimentary igloo. There's no carving out blocks of ice like the Inuit people, right. But you actually just pile up a bunch of snow, so it's about hip high, shoulder high, and then let it harden. And then while you let it harden, then you make a cup of tea and you wait for it to harden, and then you're able to then dig a hole right in the front and then hollow out the inside so there's enough place for people to sleep, basically. And we had about 6 people in there, and it was very cozy. While all the others, they set up a tent on the lean-to with the wind just ripping up underneath the floorboards. They were miserable. We were cozy and comfortable, and really had a nice, comfortable time. And then at 5 a.m, we got out all our boots were rock hard because they had frozen in the night. And then we walked up the A-Ball Trail. This is before they rerouted it. And it was steep as all hell. And I remember at halfway up, I said, I don't know if I can do this. I wasn't in shape at the time. And then I was thinking of that song by Foreigner, Hot Blooded. and that kind of just went up and kept driving me. And I just kept going and going. And we did I think it's a French maneuver where you kind of zigzag up the bank, and we reached the table and then got to the summit, and crystal clear day. It's gorgeous up there. You're a mile high and you're looking straight at the knife edge. And I said, wow, there's a whole nother world out there. That was really what set it off for outdoor backpacking.
Because you did actually say, and I wrote this down in quotes, you said, what else is out there? So what else was out there for you?
Well, once I became proficient in video editing and getting all of the camera gear, I said to my friend, hey, I did Katahdin in the wintertime. How about we go do the knife edge this time? And you and I will take a weekend off and we'll do it. We've never done it before, but let's just try it. And we hiked around about 9 miles to Roaring Brook and came up the other side of Katahdin to Chimney Pond. And we had sleds on our backs, and that was hard enough just getting to Chimney Pond. And then we got our crampons on and we went up the saddle trail and got up to the saddle. And when we got to Baxter Peak, the clouds had cleared and the winds, usually when you're up there and you have cameras, the wind just wreaks havoc on it. That's all you hear in the audio. The wind died down to nothing.
Wow.
And it was this
that was awesome.
Strange calmness that just overtook us. And I could do full panoramic views, and it was amazing. And then I looked over and I said, let's try to do the knife edge. And not knowing what was ahead of us, it started out fine. I scraped my back up against a rock and lost my snowshoes off the back of me, and they went tumbling over a ravine. So then I had to go free climb down and retrieve them because they were my brother's snowshoes. So I didn't want to lose my brother's snowshoes.
Of course.
And then as things progressed along the knife edge, as you know, the knife edge is very, very steep on both sides,
sure,
very, very thin.
Sure.
They call it the knife edge for a reason.
Yeah, there's a clue in the title. The clue in the title, by the way. Yeah.
And it's hard enough and treacherous to do it in the summertime, but
sure.
I had never done it in the summertime. I only known it as the winter, so we did it in the winter. And about halfway through the knife edge, the wind picked up, of course, to about 40, 45. That was our estimate, mile per hour winds. And that's at the time when my friend finally looked over to me and said, look, I didn't think I would tell you this, but I'm afraid of heights. So that presented a whole new challenge.
Really?
We finally got to a part. We got to a part where it's kind of infamous on the trail. It's called the Chimney, and you have to kind of do a series of technical moves to get down. Sure. And that alone stalled us for about an hour while I worked to get my friend's foot down. I almost had to get rope out to try to belay him, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't want to. So we finally got down, and then and then we got to the Dudley Trail, and I remember looking down at Chimney Pond, seeing the ranger like looking up at us because the sun was going down and just kind of shaking his head in disbelief, like, what are these guys doing? So I had read somewhere that there's this something called a glissading, and we had our ice axes out, and so we sat on our butts and we slid down, realizing time was fleeting and the sun was going down. We slid down on our butts. My friend stopped abruptly ahead of me and was looking up at the trail as I came careening down, and my crampon literally came probably about 6 inches away from his face before I could actually dig in my ice axe. I was using my ice axe to kind of steer. And we finally got down. My camera stopped working because GoPro batteries, that's how they are in the cold. But I finally got down and was able to turn on the GoPro. And I said, that was the most tumultuous time of my life, but it was amazing. It was totally amazing. And my friend would beg to differ, but we did survive that journey, and he never went backpacking with me again, but we're still
really
friends.
Yeah. How surprising. So what do you get out of it then? What do you what does that danger give you?
Adrenaline. It's adrenaline and a good story to tell, and I think that's what's always driven me.
It's the story that drives you first, isn't it?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I'm actually going to come on to the hike just after this one last question, because this also fascinated me. You were looking for other adventures, and you went out on an 1841 whaling ship. How long were you out there on that for?
I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, very nice.
For the viewers that can't see it, I have a model ship, but
well, the viewers won't be able to see because I'm not recording the video. But that's great.
Yeah. There is a old ship in New Bedford, Massachusetts. It was built in 1841 at the height of the whaling industry here. It's when Moby Dick, the whole story of Moby Dick, the ship, Herman Melville wrote that book about the exact same time. And Mystic Seaport is a museum out in Connecticut, and they put about a $12 million restoration into this ship, and they were going to go take it out sailing. In honor and heritage of this period of American history, and they needed a correspondent who was crazy enough to do some stuff like go aloft and rig the sails and work with the crew. And I had no idea what sailing was about, but at this point I was working at the paper and I was getting kind of tired of the same old community stories, and I saw a headline that said "Wanted, a stowaway" and I said, what is this all about? And so immediately I read the description. I said, this is all about me. It's an adventure. It's sailing the high seas. And then for a series of interviews, I went in and talked to them, and they realized I showed them my stories. I did some video work with them, and they hired me. Out of the thousands of people that applied for the position, they hired me. And that was my ticket out of Booth Bay and onto my next kind of adventure.
Wow.
And so for 3 months, I was on an 1841 whaling ship as we toured the eastern ports of New England, really telling the story about, it wasn't celebrating whaling, it was telling the story about the impact of whaling and what actually happened during that time of America.
Sure.
It was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, we tend to put our current day ideas and whatever the word is, our current day stuff that's going on with us back into 2 centuries ago when things were entirely different. So we judge people by different times, and it just seems so damn unfair. So you do all this crazy stuff, and you like to do all this stuff, and then you got contacted, didn't you? So tell us how the project to actually do the film started.
Yeah, so I went back to my home after the crazy sailing adventure, and I was like, okay, well, what's next? So I went back to some of my old odd jobs, and I got a call from the local police department, which
that's never good.
Under ordinary circumstances, but I was friends with one of the local policemen. He was kind of a community figure, and he loved to get people interested in things, and he knew I was doing some camera work, and he said, hey, I heard that there's a man, Steve, and his son, Carl. They're both from our hometown. They're headed out to do an Appalachian Trail hike in March. And wouldn't it be cool to do like a 20-minute interview with them just to see what it's all going to be about. And in my mind, my wheels were already turning. And I said, okay, I'm going to scrap the 20-minute interview. I'm going to do a full-length documentary on the Appalachian Trail, because
so you saw that straight away in your mind. He suggested this interview, and you thought, let's do a proper thing.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, because it was more of an experiment for me, because I knew I wanted to do a full-length documentary. I knew I wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. I knew I couldn't do the Appalachian Trail at that point in my life, so why not do it vicariously through two characters? Sure. And so the next couple of months, I read A Walk in the Woods. I did all the research that I could about the Appalachian Trail, and then I approached Carl and Steve. Carl was a couple years below me in high school, and just kind of casually put it out there that I would love to do a documentary piece. And I think they were skeptical because they didn't know my experience or the total breadth of what I had envisioned. But they seemed to agree with it, and that they would carry cameras with them. And it was very much an experiment for them, because they didn't know if they were going to finish the Appalachian Trail. Exactly. And so so on both ends, we were working with an experiment. I didn't know what kind of story was going to be produced out of this experiment, and I didn't know if they were going to finish or if they're going to be changed people by the end of it. And that's kind of the startings of how Walking Home began. But
you could have just done the 20-minute interview just in case it didn't work out, couldn't you? That obviously wasn't going to work enough for you. And
we would have 57 views on YouTube.
Exactly. Yes. So how did they had to learn how to use the cameras, because there are certain. They did some pretty good filming, didn't they? From what I saw in the documentary. So what did you do? Take them on sort of lessons, as it were, with the camera, or to go a couple of overnight hikes with them?
At the time, we had GoPro 2s. The second generation of GoPros had just come out, and I was proficient enough in them that I could say, look, this is how you record. This is the type of thing I'm looking for. And I'm really looking forward to, Carl and Steve, how you feel. So at certain checkpoints during your adventure at shelters and stuff, I want you to be recording that and kind of give these confessionals. I was really basing it off of a lot of the reality TV garbage shows that you would see, like an MTV, those kind of confessionals where, a certain sequence would happen, and then they would have the poor sucker in the back of the room doing a confessional. Yeah. And that's kind of the setup of what I was envisioning. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had enough proficiency in the camera to say, this is how you would do a night lapse. Right. This is how you would set this up. And I really want reality. I want reality as it is. And then I'm going to go visit you at certain points in the trail. And the team at Channel 7, that's the local access channel, they didn't know yet that what I had planned that I was going to drop in on them yet, or that I'd be asking for a budget to be able to do that. But ultimately, once I did that, the whole community kind of backed it and got behind me, because they had seen my byline in the local paper. So they said, oh, Ryan, he's an adventurer. He's going to make a good story out of this. So eventually I was able to drop in on them at 4 different times of the Appalachian Trail.
Tell us where you dropped in on them.
I first came in on them at Roan Mountain, right as they got out of the Smokies into Tennessee. Sure. I then dropped, and I followed them all the way into Damascus and a little beyond that. And then I dropped in Vermont, a part of the Long Trail, into New Hampshire, and then Maine. Wow. Those were the main points.
That's pretty tough. So, but you actually did about 400 miles on the trail, didn't you? But you were carrying quite a lot of gear with you, weren't you? How much? What was your backpack?
Yeah, people would laugh if they saw me, and I think that's what a lot of people did. They kind of mocked me because so many people are about the ultralight experience. I had no idea what shakedown meant. And so not only was I packing stupid things like canned soup and like liquids and all this stuff, I had my tripod and I had my camera around my neck, which was a Canon 60D at the time, and a big honking shotgun mic coming out of the camera. And so when people saw me on the trail, they said, who is this guy? And that's where I kind of got the trail name Ken Burns as the famous documentarian maker. Yeah,
there's worse things to be called, to be fair.
That's true. That's true. And so my pack, while most people were rocking 30 to 35 pounds if they weren't ultralight, I was doing about 60 pounds. And I was carrying a tent because I didn't have an ultralight tent. I had a Everest rated tent, which was a winter tent that my friend had given me, which is about 10 or 11 pounds that I would carry out.
That's hilarious.
And while I wasn't going to get swept away by any winds, I was definitely swept away with criticism of my my equipment.
Who gives a crap? I would never worry about things like that. Now, I'd seen bits of the documentary. I hadn't actually sat down to watch it, but I sat up in my bed the other day and turned on YouTube and watched the entire documentary. And of course, I saw our friend Emily Leonard, who'd actually been on the show recently, quite prominently in the story. How did Emily get involved?
So Emily is an interesting character. She's also from Maine, and she's very outspoken, and she's out there.
Sure.
And she had actually met up with my two main subjects, Carl and Steve, right around Fontana Dam. She had been hiking with a veteran who had kind of ditched her on the trail, and she was all alone. Yeah. So naturally, she needed someone to hike with because she felt uncomfortable being a woman on the trail and kind of felt alone. So she stumbled upon Carl and Steve, who were very amicable, and let her kind of tag along. And as I kind of came into the story in Roan Mountain, they had just gotten out of the woods. It had been like a 10-day downpour, and they had taken a 0 day, and I sat with Steve, and he said, well, we had met somebody. She's from Maine. Her name's Emily. She's kind of overbearing. She's kind of like, I think her name is Mary Ellen, or the woman from A Walk in the Woods. And so I want to make you aware of that. And so I said, okay, well, this will be interesting. And I knew her name was Black Bear. So I said, okay, well, let's check it out. And so the next day we went on the trail, and I eventually came across Black Bear, and she was very outgoing, like the report said. And she was very nice as well, though. And I didn't have hiking poles at all. I was, as you knew, I was ill prepared, overpacked, and she provided me with hiking poles. And as I got more and more dehydrated and desperate because I was not in shape, I didn't have my trail legs. Yeah. She made sure that I had the proper supplements and stuff.
She's a very caring woman, isn't she? She's something.
She very much. Yeah. So the criticism, which basically became embraced, was that she was the mother of the trail family. She was the mother bear, and that she would look after everyone. And I took that with everything, because I wanted I needed someone to mother me, basically. and she actually looked after me as I was filming. Well, once the whole trail once my subjects went along, spoiler alert, they actually did finish the trail, and the whole story is put behind them. And then I got into the actual post-production and making the story of walking home. I thought about it. Emily texted me and said something about, how's the footage coming? Can I add any footage of my own? And then that struck me. Why not just add her to the video? She was definitely a big part of this story, and I would be remiss if I didn't have her as some part of the story. So I invited her out to Booth Bay and to do a sit-down interview. And 5 minutes into the sit-down interview, I said, yeah, that was the real deal. Yeah. I really needed her as part of the story. And now when I look at comments on YouTube, there's so many people that are receptive to who Emily is. Yes. And very much people follow in her inspiration. And really after that, that's almost jump-started a career for her as well as an author of Appalachian Trail books and hiking.
I'm sure she comes across a very warm person, and they were lucky to meet her because I think she's terrific. And they were great guys as well, by the way. And I see that bond between the two of them growing as time went on. And I must say, for somebody who didn't immerse yourself in a thru hike, and you must have had tons and tons of footage, you really captured the feelings out there. That was quite terrific, because you're on the periphery of other people's adventures. So how did you really understand what you were looking at, if you know what I mean?
So every time I would visit them on the trail, I would kind of make mental note of what was happening and how Carl changed since the last time I'd seen him. How Steve had changed since the last time I'd seen him. And on purpose, he was another part of the story. He had told me when I was making the film, don't focus on, he got very spiritual about it, but he said, there's so many people that want to talk about the physical part of the trail. You need to talk about the emotional part of the trail. And he talked about some type of Hindu kind of duo belief or something like that. Sure. And I took that to heart. I said, let's focus on the emotional part of the story. So when I'd meet up with Carl and Steve, they would hand me their SD cards full of footage, and I would exchange it for a new fresh SD card. I ended up with about 2.1 terabytes worth of footage, which is a god-awful amount of footage to sift through. So then I had the task of watching every single clip, every single frame that they had shot, and kind of piece together. That's the interesting thing, is I didn't have any narrative in my head about how I was going to sculpt this story. But the more I watched of the footage and the more I watched, I could piece things together. So when you see Walking Home, it's not an exact verbatim version of how they lived their life on the Appalachian Trail. It's how I put it together, kind of like a puzzle piece.
I did notice a few things were out of sync, not out of sync, but some bits were after bits that came earlier, if you know what I mean, which was kind of weird, but at the same time, the whole thing hung together. I say what I saw, you really caught what it felt to be out there. I was particularly excited, of course, because going up Katahdin, which is the end of the hike, obviously, it's also the end of the film. So, and you obviously knew that because you've obviously done Katahdin before. What was that day like for you to go up to Katahdin?
It was terrifying. It was emotional. It was.
Wasn't snowing.
It wasn't snowing. That was a difference. Yeah, I was surprised to see that there were people actually at the top of the summit. That was pretty surprising. I prepared to go to Katahdin while I was following Steve and Carl, knowing that they were eager to get this trail just done. They were once they reached Maine, they were ready to get this thing done. Sure. And I invited On Purpose, who's the other character in Walking Home, to come with me. Sure. And I had to get a permit because Baxter State Park is very stringent about the rules that apply in a state park. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't have any drones. I had to follow certain arbitrary rules and stuff. And this is at a time where Baxter State Park and Katahdin are major destinations in the summertime. So there are tons of tourists that are also climbing the trail along these with the thru-hikers. Sure. So we got a hostel that day of, or the night of, we got into Millinocket and we got a hostel, and I had seen some of the characters that I'd hiked with that were at the hostel who had already finished there. And in the morning we set out, and getting just our equipment together, we were late to get the bus going, and then they closed the gates at a certain point. So I was already freaking out about that, and I knew that Carl and Steve were eager to try to get up the mountain, and they would be waiting for me at the base of the mountain of the hunt trail. Sure. And so the bus just got in. They got a scold warning. They got a reprimand from the ranger saying you can't be late, and that's kind of my fault. And then we finally get to the base of the mountain, and I see Steve and Carl aren't there. And this is the end of my film. This is the finale of my film. This is like the big moment, and they're not there. And I hurriedly rush over to the rangers at the point, who look at me incredulously like, who is this schmuck with the camera? What's going on here? And I pull out my permit. I'm like, I have a permit. Thank you very much. Being very entitled, you know. Yes. And I said, have you seen Steve and Carl at all? They're waiting for me, and they kind of shake their head incredulously. And then they look at my permit and they read it and they say, Ryan Leighton. Oh, you're from Booth Bay. Oh yeah, Bub. Yeah, they were right here about 5 minutes ago. They just went up the trail like that. There's this kind of behavior about Mainers that if there are people from away, they're not going to be as helpful to you unless they realize that you're a native and that
you're good.
You're one of them.
You're good to go.
So I once they saw that I was one of them, they changed their whole disposition, and they kind of told me everything I needed to know. And I was really in shape at that point. So I scurried up the trail knowing I had to catch them with all my camera gear on. I set my drone operator, because they don't allow drones to fly over the mountain. I set my drone operator to go climb the mountain adjacent to Katahdin, the owls. So if I got caught with a drone, it wouldn't be traced back to me. It would be back to my camera operator.
All right.
So he was begrudgingly running up the other mountain, and there was a ranger at the bottom warning hikers about incoming thunderstorms. I blew them off and just kept running. And I literally ran probably past 150 people as they watched me scurry up the side. And I didn't stop until I found Walking Man and GQ. And
because that would have been ruined, wouldn't it? The whole film would have been ruined without those pictures.
It would have, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I finally reached them, and they were just as surprised to see me. Like, where did you come from? And then my camera assistant came running up beside them as well. And we were out of breath, but we were just so happy to be with them. And then we followed them up for the rest of Katahdin. And once we got up to the top where the summit is, like I said, I was surprised to see 100 people standing up there. And I kind of cleared the path and say, look, a thru-hiker's coming in. There's a big thru-hiker. And I kind of set up the scene in a way that once Carl or GQ came up and he saw all these people just staring at him. He was kind of like a deer in headlights, and it kind of seemed climactic. But at the same point, I had cameramen all around Katahdin taking video of like the wildlife and the moose, because it's just loaded with wildlife and beautiful things. And really the title shot with the eagle that's on the pine tree,
beautiful.
That was there at Able Bridge, and we flew that without camera because we couldn't get into the iPad because we couldn't get service and we didn't know what the password was, so we were flying with no camera whatsoever. And out of dumb luck, or trail magic as one might say, we captured one of the most beautiful scenes with a drone camera. And so on purpose, GQ walking home, we had all met up on the summit, and it was a beautiful summit day. And on the ride home, that's when On Purpose was telling me some strategies about how to make this film so that it appealed to many more people. And I think ultimately he was right. And then eventually, I would say a month later, Emily Leonard then summited Katahdin, and so
which you mentioned at the end as well, and also On Purpose when he summited as well a year later.
Yep, they all did.
Now, I'm absolutely delighted that it's free because, as I said, I think it's a terrific watch, and I highly recommend it to listeners if they haven't seen it already. But why did you make that decision for it to be free? You could have made some money on this. I mean, that sounds terrible, by the way, but you know what I mean. It is such a good movie that you could have sold it for $5, whatever.
And I got many suggestions to do that, and ultimately, I didn't know how many people actually wanted to watch a video like this, and I wanted to see, just like the experiment of being able to walk the Appalachian Trail in its entirety, I wanted to see if I could actually make a full-length feature documentary in its entirety. And I barely made it, but I did it. Three days after I got married, mind you, I premiered the film. And really part of the excitement about being a filmmaker is manipulating the footage between the beginning and the end. And once you're done with it, you're kind of just done with it.
I'm sure.
And it was achievement all in itself, that like once you're done with a through hike, okay, what's next? I'm moving on to the next thing. So it was kind of an afterthought.
But when hang on, when you're done with the through hike, I can guarantee you think about it every single day for the rest of your life. And I'm sure you don't watch the film over and over again, do you?
There was a point where I was watching it over and over, and now
you are done with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would play it when I go on runs. I'd play it in the background just so I could hear it.
Interesting.
So that I knew every frame that I had manipulated. So that all came together, and then I had to license all the music, and that in itself, I had to spend money, my own money to produce it. And then I put it on the YouTube, and it came in two parts at first, the first part, and it got such a response in the first part. I put the two parts together, put it out there, and it just took off. It just took off.
The comments are great, Ryan. The comments are wonderful. I think you've done something quite remarkable, and you did refer to, when we spoke the other day, you referred to the mileage you've gotten out of the success of the film. Right, you haven't made much money, but what has the film done for you as a person?
The best impact that I've made on the hiking community is how inspiring it is for people. I've had truck drivers who've had mental health issues up and quit their job and go hike the Appalachian Trail because they've watched Walking Home.
Isn't that cool?
And they'll reach out and tell me about that.
Isn't that cool?
So to me, that is the ultimate compensation, is that I don't need the money. I just need to know that I'm making a difference in people's lives. And that was kind of, I didn't realize that impact until I realized that 4 or 5 years later, I'm still doing screenings. I just did a screening a couple weeks ago at L.O. Bean at the flagship store in Freeport. It went on to win the Maine Outdoor Film Festival in 2018. It's still, and I say that it's amazing how much mileage we've gotten out of it, because I did not think that in 2022 I'd still be screening the film and that people would still be watching it, and that every new class of thru hikers that goes and hikes the trail have inevitably seen it or have discussed it or have seen it on Facebook and comment about it. And so it's just the overall impact and what it's done has been overwhelming, and I'm very humbled by it. And I'm very much still friends and in touch with all the people that are in the film. In fact, this weekend I'll be going up to the North Maine woods and doing a 2-day hike with Emily and her husband Bruce.
Cool. How cool. You know what? I think, when I watched it, I thought this man knows much more about it than he lets on. There's something about it. You've got the essence of the trail, which is a wonderful thing to get, by the way. And I just on behalf of the hiking community, or people I know in the hiking community, I'm going to put a link in the show notes and make sure the few people who haven't seen it, and I was one of them, by the way, watch the whole film, because it is well worth watching. But I really appreciate you coming on the show to talk to us about it.
Yes, thank you so much. And really, as a afterthought on that, your last comment, that really getting the essence of the trail is the ultimate thrill of any journalist. That's all you can really hope to do, is know nothing about something, learn everything about something, and then put it out to a mass audience so that they can learn along with you.
Well, you certainly achieved that. You really did. You really did. Okay, man. Well, look, good to talk to you, and I wish you only the best with your future adventures, and stay safe. Now you're married with kids. You might want to slow down a bit.
Yeah, that's true. The adventures they're still going to go on, but they're going to come a lot slower. Yes.
Okay, man. Well, take it easy. Okay.
Thanks so much.
Cheers, then. Bye. How interesting, eh? He's a man definitely devoted to his craft, and if you haven't seen it, you should watch it as soon as you can. I've put a link directly to the film in the show notes. I loved his attitude and the way he was able to capture the soul of a thru hike. And of course, he fell in love with Emily, as everybody who meets her surely must. She's an unstoppable force. You'll see it in this great film. Now, Dom, when I saw him on the screen, the word glum immediately came to my mind. He's always been so up, and I know that this is crushing for him. Here he is. So, now, I've actually labelled this Dom's exit interview, and he took exception to it. Firstly, Dom, how are you?
I'm good, now that I've recovered from seeing this labelled as my exit recording.
So, there's a reason it's your exit recording. We haven't heard from you for a couple of weeks, so what's happened?
So, I had part of my plan, because I thought I was pushing myself too much, and I wanted to be able to hike at a pace that I was more comfortable with. Sure. I had planned to come home, and then after a couple of days retooling my gear, I was going to start at the Massachusetts-Vermont border and then hike north at a kind of in a more leisurely pace.
Sure.
The few 100, 150 miles or so before I started to get some pain in my right buttock, in my gluteal region. And
wow,
my knee was hurting. And so I pushed it through, got to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, rented a car, came home, and as was the case in the past, went to see my medical professionals, and
you're never not going to see a medical professional, are you?
Yeah, right. And so I have 2 stress fractures in my lower spine and in the sacrum.
In your spine? I didn't realize that. Wow.
It's in the tailbone, kind of that area.
Sure.
And in the pelvis. And I have what's called a low-grade tear of one of my gluteal muscles on the right. And so putting all those together, it's a bit of a pelvic dumpster fire. And really, it's just rest, physical therapy, and time. They'll all heal, but the therapy is not the White Mountains.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not, and it probably wouldn't have been a great idea to go in there with that, as you call it, physical dumpster fire, which is rather nice, actually, by the way.
Yeah.
So, do you know how it happened? Is this an injury that is cumulative and just gets worse and worse? That's how we get it, or was this in a fall or something?
Well, I that's exactly the questions that I answered at my doctor's office, and the whole time, the first half of the trail, I've fallen maybe 7 or 8 times, and none of the falls have been. 2 of those were during my nemesis, the roller coaster.
Yes.
2 of them, none of them were in that area, and none of them were really that serious. And so everybody thought that this is really more, and I wasn't pushing myself. I did some days where I did 20 miles, but those are very few. Most of the time I was in the 15 to 18, sometimes 18 range, but I felt comfortable with that. So I think it's really the cumulative 1,100 or 1,000 miles that I'd hiked that they're attributing it to. I'm getting some blood work to make sure that it's not a problem with my bones. It's either
Right.
one or the other, overuse
Sure.
or weak bones. I don't think that's the case. I think it's, as my sports medicine colleague said, it's really, you don't have to look very far from the southern half of the AT to really come up with an explanation as to why this happened.
Sure.
So,
I mean, as a medical man yourself, I mean, what is your takeaway in terms of the physicality of the trail and what it can do to you? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think that I've always respected that the trail can literally kick my butt.
How appropriate.
I think, yes. And I think, to me, this validates that issue. This is I said early on, boy, this is much harder than I anticipated it was going to be. Fun,
Sure.
challenging, but hard. And I think this is an example. Had I to do it over again, I think that certainly it made me feel like I could have prepared more with shakedown hikes and hiking. But at some point, I don't think it's possible to prepare enough to be physically conditioned, except to go to the gym and boost my muscle strength. So I think that maybe a lighter pack. I'm not sure what. Those are all things that I considered when it became clear that I wasn't going back this year.
Sure. So how much did your pack weigh then towards the end? What were you carrying?
Well, once I got my winter stuff home and substituted, my pack weight was about, my total pack weight with a few days worth of food and a couple liters of water was about 30 pounds, which is not bad.
You know what? No, that's not bad at all. And I'm sure there's always there's a balance for, comfort, and you want to have enough things with you that makes your hike enjoyable. And 30 pounds, you're a big guy like me, so we can carry. If you're looking at percentage of your body weight, it's probably not that bad. Although, of course, that percentage has gone up a bit because, of course, you've lost quite a bit of weight, haven't you?
Yeah. So I've lost about 35, 40 pounds.
Right. Are you going to try to keep that off, or how are you going to work with that? Right.
So it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks of physical therapy. I got the okay to go swimming, do some short walking, and so I'm going to be starting that as well to stay in shape. I'm on this online weight loss program now. I rejoined just to make sure. I'd like to get back on the trail lighter than I left it. Not that much.
Right. Impressive.
But I'd like to be lighter than I left it.
Have you got your appetite back yet? Or have you lost that appetite?
Yeah, I've never been one to lose my appetite at all. So I'm eating differently. I'm eating mostly plant-based meals and really trying to be mindful of how much I'm eating. Very much not trying to eat as much as I can, like I was when I was hiking.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't spoken really, and I'm not really prepared for this interview at all. We just suddenly decided to do it today. You look glum, and you do. I mean, you got the big smile again every now and then, but you look glum. You're sad it's over, I'm sure. What did you take away from this hike? Because you're a positive guy, so what did you take away as positives from this hike?
Oh, there's so many more positives. I think that then I'm glum. I'm disappointed that I'm not out hiking, but
Sure.
Thankfully this was a black and white issue. This wasn't well, maybe if I did this, I can get back early. This is, I'm not getting back on. So I didn't waste a lot of time trying to finagle myself as a way I could get back on trail. I think what I took away from it is it is such an extraordinary experience. I got to meet people. The people I think I'm going to put in a separate category, but I got to get to know the southeastern mountains, the Appalachian region, from the ground up, literally, and really got to see such beauty and such diverse environments in this country. But I think the thing that I take away the most is the people that I became friends with. There's an extraordinary, the default position on the AT is that of kindness and concern for your fellow human beings. That Absolutely. Is far and away the what permeates the community out there. I've been in touch. There's about 18, 19 people or so that, I've hiked with off and on, and I have their cell phone numbers, and I've been keeping in touch with them. And, when I told them the results of the MRI and that I wouldn't be coming back, because, I had said, listen, I'll see you guys up in New England when you catch up after I do my flip up. We were all looking forward to that. And when they heard about the MRI results, there was genuine concern. There was good wishes. We're going to get you out there next year. I had a couple of people call me who were in somewhat the same boat and said, okay, let's plan on how we're going to team up together next year. There was a lot of people with genuine, boy, we're going to miss you kind of sentiments. And that really made me feel good.
I'm sure it did. I'm sure, there's so much about this trail that does make you feel good, isn't there? And so little that doesn't. Yet you hear so much online, I always call it crap, online crap about how entitled hikers are and so on. But I never met what I thought were entitled people. Every now and then you do anyway. You meet loads in so-called real life, but on the trail, they're very few and far between. People want everybody else to do well, and they as you say, they're kind. That's the default position for people. You walk into a shelter, everybody says hi, and you chat, and you can get involved with each other if you want to, and really enjoy the time you spend with them.
Yeah, I would say that if you looked at the rate of entitlement amongst the general population and compared that to the subset of people on the AT, that rate is lower on the AT. I've had so many people say, gee, I wonder what that could be, or do you need water? Do you need this? Do you have enough food?
Sure.
It was really wonderful.
Yeah. So do you think you'll go back?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I have put together a couple of short plans for just some 3-day shakedown hikes in Massachusetts to see how I'm going to feel when I go back in October.
Right.
So
nice.
I'm presuming I'm going to be able to get back on trail by then, that I'll be healed up, and my physical therapy is going well. And these are going to be short enough that, some of my friends and family can join me on it. But I don't want to lose that, not so much the skills as much as the feeling of being out on the trail. And so I'm going to try to make sure I get to do some hiking, as long as it's not super cold, throughout from now to the spring.
Much of it is the connection, isn't it? Getting back there. I know that when I stepped back on the trail, certainly when I went second time, I just felt at home there straight away. You'll have that feeling. You may not have hiked that part, or maybe you have because you've hiked up north anyway. But that feeling of going back on the trail, thinking, yeah, I can do this. I know how this works. And frankly, if you get an injury, that's the thing that can get all of us off trail, isn't it? And there's just nothing you can do about it. If you could have identified a catastrophic fall, not that you would have wanted to have it, but if you could have identified it, that would have been simple. But the fact that this has just happened is just one of those things, and it could have stopped the best hiker in the world, let alone just some old guys like us. So it's just the way it goes. But look, you've been an absolute joy to have on the show, and I was so sorry when I heard you weren't going to be going back, and I know that you've enjoyed it so much as well. So I really appreciate you coming along and telling the story and agreeing to do the exit story as well. Well, look, let me know when you get back on. And we'll just see how you feel, and we'll just try to stay in touch.
I will, and I know that there's some of the folks that I've been hiking with that listen to you,
Cool.
listen to these podcasts, and I'll
Cool.
just tell them that I'll be back next year. I'll be a section hiker. I'll be a very enthusiastic section hiker, and
You'll be a lasher.
I'll be a lasher, like Sundial and Fick. But
but would the plan be to try to do it in one go next year, the rest of it? Is that the sort of how you're thinking?
You know, in my mind, what I'd like to do is I really would love to do Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine northbound all together.
Yeah, I'm sure.
After those 3 states, then the other states, the other sections that I need to make up, I feel like I could do those in small sections.
Sure.
But I think that I really want to do New England together. That's
it's so
the part
special. It's so special.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I've been itching to do that.
I think, in my opinion, you should fill in those other bits first and then leave that for your end hike of those last 3 states together. I mean, it is the epic end, isn't it?
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Well, look, good
to start that out at a good time. Yeah.
Well, it's been good to catch up again. We will stay in touch, and all I do is hope you heal well and that you get that smile back on your face. All right.
All right. Thanks a lot, and good luck. Have a great time on your trip next week.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Cheers, then.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, the smile came back at the end, didn't it? And he's going to be coming back on the trail next year. Good for him. I have really enjoyed his contribution when he's been on the show. And I think that the phrase, a pelvic dumpster fire, will stay with me for quite some time. Thanks, Dom, for that rather unknown medical term. Well, I remember, and I forgot to mention it when I was putting out last week's show, our Woods Hole weekend is coming together fast. You can read all about it on the Woods Hole website, but hurry, because places are limited, and at the time of writing, which remember is 8 days ago now, are already more than half full. Check it out if you want to learn how this long-distance hiking thing is done. And even if a thru hike isn't in your immediate future, you'll learn so much, laugh so much, and be fed like a king or a queen over 3 days. It truly is a blast. Another shocker this week is going to come from Dan. He's had a pretty drama-free hike so far, until this week. Here's Dan.
Morning.
Hey Dan, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I recently got Lyme disease, which is not super.
Oh no! Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened.
Well, I had like this splitting headache for 6 days, and I thought I was just dehydrated because of the heat.
Yeah.
And then I was in Warwick, New York at the drive-in, and I woke up and I still had the headache, so went to the hospital, and they said, yeah, you know that giant bug bite on your back? That's from a tick, and you have Lyme disease.
Oh, jeez.
Now I'm just,
do you? You obviously can't check out your back. So, have you been getting anybody else to back check you at all?
Yeah, I had some friends back check me. Just give me a look, and then they had the doctor take a picture to show me. And now I've just got it covered with a bandage and just plugging along. I'm so close to the end that I'll crawl down on bloody stumps if I have to.
Well, that is the spirit, but really, man, did they give you any medication?
Yeah, so I'm on doxycycline, which is the one that they prescribe for Lyme. The only problem is you're supposed to stay out of the sun, and the doctor's like, can you stay out of the sun? Is that a problem? And I go, well, I live outside, but I wear a long-sleeve shirt.
Blimey. How long do they think you've had it for then?
I probably had it for like 6 or 7 days before I caught it, which I'm happy about, because if you just leave it be, it can cause serious damage later on in life.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I'm glad I caught it when I did. Shit could be worse.
So what did the doctor say to you? Did he give you any idea of what the next few months are going to be like?
Just here's a 3-week dosage of the antibiotics. Take it until it's done. And yeah, the fact is I did it for like 6 days with it. I still did like a 23-mile day with Lyme disease. So
Jeez.
I feel pretty confident that I can finish.
And is it, so tell me what it feels like. Have you still got a headache? I mean, how are you feeling?
The headache is lessened a lot more. It used to be kind of like a splitting migraine. It's definitely less that. It's more just general fatigue and stiffness. My neck is really stiff. I don't sleep well. I've only done 5 miles today, but I am super duper sleepy. But,
Well, the weather does
another disease.
The weather does that as well, but, this is obviously a bit more than the weather. So where actually are you now?
I'm in Vernon Township, New Jersey, outside of a CVS. Crossing in New Jersey yesterday in the rain, which was awesome. So happy to have rain.
I bet you are, yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. I love hiking in the rain. And yeah, I'm going to hitch back out, camp in Unionville, New York tonight.
I remember it well.
Along.
Yeah. So how many miles? Do you know how many miles you've got to go?
300-ish. So I'm doing more than, I guess, my original plan. So I'm going to make it to Harper's Ferry, and then I'm going to do another 200-ish miles after that to meet my parents in Shenandoah.
Right.
To do a little, cabin to cabin kind of hike with them. I'm trying to get them into more outdoorsy stuff. So 400, 500 total, but only 300-ish of the actual stuff I need to do.
Yeah, yeah. How are you feeling now you're coming to the end? Do you feel happy, sad, or slightly? Well, the Lyme disease kind of puts a cloud over everything, doesn't it? So how are you feeling?
It's a mix. On one hand, it's been wonderful. I'm seeing all I saw my friend Mulligan the other day, who I met on day 3 in Georgia, which was incredible to see her again. Yeah. But on the other hand, I normally eat very healthy at home. So, with the diet of ramen and Pop-Tarts, I've been having a lot of acid reflux and heartburn, and I don't like that. I would like to go back to eating fresh food all the time.
Hang on. I thought you were meals, not miles anyway. I thought you'd been eating food healthily, or have you just fallen back off the wagon then?
Well, I do. You can only pack out so much fresh food, it only lasts for so long, and eventually you have to go back to eating candy all day. I'm still packing out lots of food, but there's just only so much you can pack out.
Yeah. Have you got a Snickers addiction yet?
No, that was the one thing I actually never heard about until I came on the AT. Nobody had Snickers on the Colorado Trail, but I'd say I have like a sour gummy worms addiction, pretty hardcore.
Right. So now I'm trying to think where you are. You've just into New Jersey, so you've hit the rocks, I presume. How are you coping with? Well, actually, more importantly, actually, how's Frankie coping with those?
Oh, he does way better with the rocks than we do. Because he is such a lower center of gravity and 4 points of connection, it's a lot easier for him to kind of dodge through these rocks and everything. I'm dealing with him. I mean, they're real slippery this morning, which I don't love, but I mean, this is nothing I haven't encountered before. Pennsylvania and New Jersey will be a bit frustrating with the rocks, but at this point, it doesn't matter. I know I'm going to make it. You know what?
I've always loved your confidence. The fact that you're going to do it, and the fact that you're still battling on with Lyme is testimony to your grit and your endeavour. I'm actually going away in 2 days' time for 10 days. But if you're going to do another 300 or 400 miles, then I'm still going to speak to you. I think after that when I get back. So I hope you carry on improving. I hope the doxycycline is really starting to help you. And when I get back, we'll catch up again and just see how that's been. But look after yourself. Take it easy. And you sent me a message saying that you're chilling. Hope you're not chilling in the sun too much.
No, it hasn't been too bad. I'm in the shade of a CVS right now, and I took 2 days off with some good friends in New Jersey. Came and saw me and fed me pizza. So.
Cool.
I feel better, just going to be a little limey, I think, for probably a week or two.
Yeah.
But, I listened to the Backpacker Radio on Quadzilla, and he did like half the AT with Lyme disease. So
he's amazing. He's amazing, isn't he? Absolutely remarkable guy. Yeah. Cool. Okay, man. Well, look, keep going. Keep on trucking. Let me know how it goes. I say I'll be back in about 10 days, 12 days from here, because I leave in 2 days' time. Enjoy the rest of it, and we'll speak when I get back, okay?
Sounds good. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, man. Take it easy. Bye.
All right, you too.
Bloody Lyme disease. This is why I always say in my presentations that the most dangerous animals on the trail aren't bears or moose. They're ticks. You really need to keep an eye out for them, or if you don't catch it early enough, you can have implications for many, many years. So check. And if you can't see your back, get someone else to check. Now, Chapter 6 of Then the How Came is coming to an end, somewhat appropriately, with our hero arriving in the town of Damascus. It wasn't easy, and he shares some pretty brutal memories of his toughest miles so far. I'll see you next week. I badly needed water, but the spring for Vandeventer was far down the steep flank of the mountain. I had neither the time nor the inclination to make that trip. The guidebook mentioned a spring 5 miles up the Appalachian Trail. I never found it. I had dragged myself along, trying to follow my slow progress by picking out the landmarks from the trail description in the guidebook. Either the trail did not quite match the book's description, or dehydration and fatigue kept me spacing on the landmarks. Whichever was the case, those last slow miles seemed to stretch into eternity. I had no idea whether I was getting anywhere, but I kept going. I finally realised that the shelter was less than a mile away when I crossed under a set of power lines at 8:20. I filled my canteens at Iron Mountain Spring, just off the Appalachian Trail, a quarter mile before the shelter, made one more moderate climb and stumbled in at 8:45. I dumped all the water into my large pan and hobbled back down the trail to the spring to refill my canteens, leaving myself with plenty of water for dinner, breakfast and the trail tomorrow. Moaning and groaning out loud, I repeated that little climb to the shelter one last time, made dinner in the dark and went to bed. On Pond Mountain today, I passed the 400-mile mark of the Appalachian Trail. It is time for all awesome little backpackers to go night-night. Shrouds of silver mist hung over Pond Mountain as I trod that hidden side trail through impenetrable rhododendron jungle. Paradoxically, summer had come earlier to this spot than to the surrounding region. Red-violet blooms sparkled on the trees. Heady fragrances wafted slowly on the warm, moist breezes. The entrance to the side trail is very difficult to find. Its very existence is known only by a chosen few. Its exact destination is also a mystery. Some say it crosses the vast western sea to Tol Eressëa, the lonely island, and thence to Valinor in the Undying Lands. Some say that it crosses the Verrazano Narrows to Staten Island. Nobody knows for sure. I scaled the final steep crag which few mortals have ever seen, much less conquered, and there he was, the High Lama of Pond Mountain. Many years ago he had resigned his position as president and CEO of a large multinational corporation, vanishing without a trace to seek a life of absolute solitude and spiritual enlightenment on this rock, a lonely outpost of spirituality so inaccessible that even the sadistic maniacs who plot new trail routes have never relocated the 80 over it. The FBI still keeps an open file on the case of his strange disappearance, but the slow years pass without one slim lead. He sat before me, a vision of spiritual splendour. A silver light seemed to radiate from his visage. His eyes were vast, dark pools of infinite wisdom. He was more than 8 feet tall and had a huge, round beer belly. Next to him I felt humbled, a miserable maggot unfit to receive a crumb of his knowledge. I prostrated myself on the ground at his feet and begged him to reveal to me the one ultimate truth. Those wondrous eyes slowly lifted to meet mine. He spoke in an ancient yet vibrant voice. "My son," he said, "I have grappled with the Absolute and sought answers to questions both trivial and profound. I have meditated on the nature of the universe. I've cut myself off from the rest of the human race, sitting here alone on this spot through decades of solitude, and I've discovered one truth which stands alone above all others." Magnificent eyes bore into mine with incredible intensity. I gasped and waited. He spoke again, his voice reverberating out into the encircling void. "The absolute truth is, I really, really, really need a babe right about now." I turned and trod the long path back down to the world of men, the sounds of his sobs receding slowly into the distance. Monday, the 6th of June, 1983, mile 436.6. Mice made a racket in the shelter all last night, just what I needed after my raccoon visitor on the previous night and yesterday's long trek. I felt fatigued, sleepy and cranky all day long, but fortunately I had an easy 16-mile walk over flattish ridge crests. I lingered leisurely over a pancake breakfast and started hiking at about 9 o'clock. The last few miles of the Appalachian Trail on Iron Mountain followed a wide, grassy old road through forests along the crest. Along the way, I passed the Nick Grinstaff Monument, a pile of rocks surrounding a hole in the ground in which a local hermit had lived and died. The trail soon turned left off Iron Mountain and followed Cross Mountain, a short ridge connecting the long parallel ranges of Iron and Holston Mountains. The crest was open pasture. Most of the time I could not see them. The AT ran through forest a few hundred feet down the left slope, but I could hear cows mooing and stomping around along the edge of the trees above me. I crossed several streams running down from those fields, but the water was obviously of suspect drinking quality. I had lunch at Double Spring Shelter on Holston Mountain. I was rained upon just as I left, but it was merely a drizzle, lasting for less than half an hour. Threatening clouds lingered for the remainder of the day. Holston Mountain was much nicer than Iron Mountain had been. While most of the latter had been covered with a young second-growth forest that was buggy and overgrown, the trees on Holston were tall and attractive, and the forest floor was open and airy. Distant vistas were just as scarce as they had been on Iron, but the footway on Holston was wide, clear, and excellently graded, the best stretch of trail I'd hiked in many miles. Like Pond Mountain, Holston was covered with nests of young grouse, and the air was once again filled with their incessant hungry cries. Occasionally, the trail would pass too close to one of their nests, and the mother grouse would flutter off, dragging a wing as if it were injured and whining like a dog in agony. Even though they were merely faking injuries in order to attract intruders towards themselves and away from their young, they sounded so pitiful that I would feel guilty about being the cause of such stress. I always hurried by those areas. I arrived at Abingdon Gap Shelter at 5 o'clock, after an easy and uneventful day on the trail. 2 guys were already there. They had hiked in from Damascus today and were heading southward towards the Smokies at the beginning of a month-long backpacking expedition. I must admit I enjoyed watching their faces as I described the climbs up Hump and Bond Mountains and other interesting sections of trail ahead. Hey, what would be the point of making all these grueling hikes if you could not torture southbounders with your war stories? 2 other guys arrived sometime later, and the shelter was full. It was the first full shelter I had seen since the Smokies. Damascus is now less than 10 miles away. I'm not going to arrive right on the schedule I planned back in Irwin. Looking back now, I find it somewhat amusing that I considered myself to be on the brink of failure when I had only come as far as Don Neal and Shelter Friday night. At that point, I had covered 44.5 very tough miles in 3 days. It is difficult now to comprehend just what the crisis was. Somehow it all worked out all right, though. Strangely, I now seem to thrive on crises, though they have always, in the past, brought out the quitter in me. It is terribly difficult to change a basic fact of your nature. Quitting's easy. You bear an awful burden when you force yourself to strive desperately towards a goal you probably cannot reach. The prospect of failure looms so much more terrible when you have put so much of yourself into the battle to succeed. The potential failure becomes the defeat of everything you are or can ever hope to be. It is much safer to quit and say, well, I didn't really try that hard anyway. Carrying this crushing burden has made me pitiless and remorseless toward myself. I look at every choice I make through a microscope and try to uncover the hidden manoeuvres of my subconscious. I know that it is terrified of this desperate gamble of mine. It wants me to quit, and it will work on me in insidious ways to bring this about. I cannot let that happen. So I walk this long pilgrimage, battling the elements, physical obstacles, fatigue, pain and loneliness. Most difficult of all, and the most dangerous to my hopes, is the battle I have to do with my own self. 1,701.9 miles to go. Tuesday, the 7th of June, 1983, mile 446.4. My last night in Tennessee was a stormy one, and I awoke this morning to fog and drizzle. I left the shelter at 7:40 and walked the 10 miles of the Appalachian Trail to Damascus in less than 4 hours. It was easy trail, and I was feeling strong and confident. Just as they had yesterday, the miles passed pleasantly and uneventfully. Before I knew it, I came upon a sign marking the boundary of the Jefferson National Forest. 3 states were now completed, and I was entering Virginia. The trail gradually descended along the ridge into the green valley where Damascus lay nestled among the mountains. The late morning sun had finally burned through the clouds as I followed the Appalachian Trail along the main street of this small southwestern Virginia town. Damascus has a population of only 1,330, but it is an important supply point both for the Appalachian Trail and a major cross-country bicycle route, as well as the commercial centre for a sizable chunk of farming country. It has, for a town of its size, a surprising variety of businesses, including a drive-in restaurant, stores, a cobbler, a laundromat and a post office. I picked up my supply package at the post office. A letter from Dave was waiting for me as well. He'd almost caught up to me. He slept in the abandoned building in Sam's Gap on the night I would have stayed there had I been able to find my way inside. I wound up pitching my tent a mere 3 miles ahead of him at Low Gap near Big Bald. The exertion of the long days he had put in trying to catch up to me after my head start wore him down, and he dawdled along with Ron for a few days to recover. He was at Nolly Chucky expeditions with Ron, and they had both benefited from the Coleman fuel I had left there. Had I run into the two of them in town that night, I probably would have stayed in Irwin one last night with them, rather than hiking the 3 miles to Curly Maple Shelter. That's life. I'll miss them. I asked the postmaster about a place to stay in town. He told me that, due to the lack of hotels or motels, the local Methodist church provides an empty 2-story house on its property to hikers and bicyclists as a hostel. I walked over to check it out. The place struck me as being somewhat dirty and shabby when I first arrived, but quickly grew on me as I started meeting my fellow guests. It wasn't exactly the Ritz, but it was a friendly place filled with a lot of good people. The building was old and weathered, but relatively clean. The sleeping arrangements were bare mattresses on the floor, but that looked comfortable enough to a person accustomed to sleeping on the hard wooden floor of a shelter. The shower I took before putting on my cleanest set of clothes was long and hot. When I was staying at the inn at Hot Springs, I read that book called Hiking the Appalachian Trail. One of the accounts was by Gene Espy, the second person ever to hike the entire trail. He had become acquainted with the chief of police in Damascus. The man befriended him and provided food, money and a place to stay while he was in town. That afternoon, I met the chief's widow, Gladys, who lives next door to the hostel. I was returning to the hostel from doing my laundry and grabbing a few burgers at a local fast food place called the Dairy King. Do I detect a possible trademark infringement suit? I was clean, dry and well fed, so naturally I was walking along with a big, stupid, trail town smile on my face, saying hi to everyone I passed because that's what you do in these small southern towns. Even the strangers who drive past on the roadwalks all smile and wave to me. It's an interesting experience for someone from the northeast. So I gave her a cheerful hello as she passed the front porch. Next thing I knew, I'd killed 2 hours of my valuable R&R time on that porch. She was a sweet old lady who was full of stories. Her husband had been killed in the line of duty around 1960, and she had lived in that house with her mother ever since, until a few years ago when her mother died. Now she's alone, but she has the hikers at the hostel next door with whom to pass the time, and everyone in town knows her. I'm glad that I spent 2 of my precious hours with her, easing her loneliness and listening to all those stories that she has probably told 1,000 times. I had a good time, but this is more disturbing evidence that I am somehow turning into almost a nice guy on this hike. I would never have taken the time to do anything like that before, much less enjoyed it. Back at the hostel, I met 2 older ladies from Pennsylvania who were hiking the Appalachian Trail in shorter segments over a period of years. Their trail name is the Go-Go Girls. They were fun. A local gentleman named George was with them. He was driving them to a local steakhouse this evening to treat them to dinner. He invited me to join them. Steak? Well, okay, if I have to. He surprised me later by paying for my meal also. I felt a little embarrassed by that, but he said that I could pay him back by helping out other thru-hikers when I get back home. This is the quality of people that you meet so often on the Appalachian Trail. I told the ladies all about Gladys, and they made plans to stop by there later and meet her, which is sort of what I was hoping for when I told them about her. Here I was, doing 2 nice things on the same day. What is happening to me? When we got back to the hostel, I thanked George and the ladies and walked over to the supermarket to buy food for the next stretch of trail. I am meeting, in a sense, all sorts of interesting hikers in the shelter registers lately. They are all somewhere ahead of me up the trail. An incessantly cheerful gentleman calls himself the Old Hawaiian Mountain Goat and signs off all his entries with aloha. There are a couple of women who call themselves the Snail Sisters, One of them wrote that they like to sit around in shelters and talk about all the miles they're going to hike that day until it gets too late to head out. Then they just stay there in that same shelter another night. Another woman calls herself Wicked Wonder. Now she sounds like just the kind of girl I need to meet right now. Finally, there is Fuzzy Jim, whose cartoon series, Anglehead, is rapidly becoming a shelter classic. In one of the hiker survey forms left here and there along the trail by the National Forest Service, he wrote that he was hiking the Appalachian Trail for the sex. I would very much like to meet these people. I wonder if anyone behind me feels the same way about me from reading my register entries. That would be pretty cool. I accomplished a good deal in Damascus today. Tomorrow morning I will replenish my supply of coal and fuel if I can find some place where it's sold in small amounts. I also need new insoles. The ones I have now are miserable specimens after 450 miles. I will also take another shower, eat something at the drive-in, and then head out for about half a day's hike. When I began this hike, I expected that my short layovers in trail towns would be restful. In actuality, they are almost more tiring than hiking the trail in their own way. I must run around doing all of the errands that need to be done before I can hit the trail once more. Today was a whirlwind that was over before I knew it. The only trail town where I really rested was Hot Springs, because I spent an extra day. Nevertheless, I do not want to get into the habit of taking many entire days off from the AT. The quick loss of physical conditioning resulting from taking just one day off in Hot Springs was astonishing. The endurance returned quickly once I resumed hiking, but the first day back on the trail was somewhat frustrating. A more insidious danger is the loss of mental resolve. After weeks on the trail, the pleasure in the small conveniences which towns provide can become a hard drug to kick. The longer a thru-hiker stays in a town, the easier it becomes to find excuses to stay even longer, especially for me, a man already equipped with his own personal demons. I've discovered that, once I tear myself away from each town, the reluctance to leave always fades quickly away. I selected the Appalachian Trail for the site of my last stand because I love the woods and the mountains. It only takes a few hours to stop missing the luxuries I left behind and to begin to enjoy the pleasures of the AT once more. What I call the trail town syndrome is not so much an unwillingness to be on the trail as much as it is merely a lethargic inertia which intensifies over time. The quicker it is to overcome, the quicker it will pass. Damascus is about 450 AT miles from Springer Mountain, and during that stretch I have seen too many would-be thru-hikers drop by the wayside after delaying their departures from a town for one day after another. They eventually just seem to lose their will to continue. I set out on this trail with perhaps the weakest will of all, and probably the most riding on the success of this mission. Deep in my soul, I know that ultimately I'm going to fail, because I have always failed before. Every day I continue my quest is a small victory for me. Tomorrow I will leave Damascus to chase my dream of Katahdin northward for a few more miles. It will become one more small victory. 1,692.1 miles to go.